welcome Stephen Parry.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I have to say I wasn't the only person working at Digital Equipment on trying to decide what the business of the future was like, but I did learn an awful lot. And it was during that time I met Dan Jones, and Lean was coming to the fore, and I really picked up a lot of ideas from Dan. I want to give tribute to Dan Jones as well. But that digital case is a case in point. Digital no longer exists, and when I was asked to join a very large team to figure out what the business of the future was, it was too little too late. And I think the thing we have to remember whenever we're thinking about change in organizations, by the time we think it's needed, it means we've got very little time. Okay, so the whole point of being in a business is keep challenging when you think everything is safe. I believe in the paranoid mentality. They're out there to take your job or eat your lunch. And if you're doing that, you're improving, you're staying ahead of the game. And that should just be a way of life. But that unfortunately doesn't happen in all organizations. A lot of them just come stuck in a rut. They're thinking they're doing fine. And really, they don't challenge the way they do things. This presentation is going to be in two parts about challenging the organization itself. The first part is going to be about some new research that has come out about what makes an organization adaptive, innovating, and an engaging organization where people love to work, contribute willingly, and customers are deeply involved in co-creation. So there is some research out there. This is not just some nirvana, a utopia. There are some real studies coming through, and I'm going to show you one of them that says this is possible, and what's more, we can measure it. And I want to show you that. The other part of my presentation is saying, well, if we know that stuff about the characteristics of the organization, what does that mean for the design of the organization? What does it mean for the measurement system? What does it mean for the training of our management and staff? How do we make decisions? I want to look at that. And then finally, if that's too esoterical, it might sound because it's at the top of the organization, I want to talk about how some of these ideas really help the workplace and changing the mindset of the workforce to understand that we need to start thinking differently. Okay? So this presentation is going to look at organizational structures and the psychology of that, and then we're going to look at how do we then engage our staff in them realizing that the old way no longer works and we have to change. Okay, so let's get into this. Now, I've put on this list here all the characteristics of most of your organizations. They're all full of trust, they've lots of knowledge, it's intelligent, you're engaging with your customers, you're learning end-to-end, you've got management support. This is a terrific environment, and most of you work in environments like that, yes? Hands up. Hands up who works great. You're the few and far between. Few and far between. Most organizations, unfortunately, are not like that. Okay? There's very little sharing of information and a strange sort of regard for people as human resources. Now, don't forget, I'm not just talking about IT and application support here. I'm talking about things like public sector services, in which you do have IT and applications. Okay? So some of these other businesses out there do have IT and application support. Okay? And some of them are quite desperate places to work. I think where you have a commercial drive to get a product out, I think there's a lot more focus and a lot more respect for the creative knowledge that the designers have. But in some of the industries that are just plodding along, IT people, developers just get treated as just another part in the machine. So let's talk about why that is so. Now, one of the things I just want to introduce you, this is a model I got in the Sense and Respond book. It's not scientifically rigorous in that it is perfect. It's probably only 90%. No, it's probably less than that. What I'm trying to illustrate here is When we're thinking about change, we can think about change at the customer interface, with the workforce, then the layer of management above, and then the middle management. And then we start talking about the structures, the measurement systems. And then we start thinking about, well, who set this up in the first place? And what was going on in his mind when he set it up this way? Okay. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is there are a number of points to introduce lean or adaptive thinking into an organization. Now, some are better than others. Okay. What I'm trying to illustrate here is there's very little point in introducing lean just for processes. And unfortunately, lean has got a name for just being introduced for process. Okay? But that's just one of many intervention points that we need to make in the organization. We need to look at our continuous improvement methods and our operating structures, which include the measurement and incentives, the way we design the services, how we think as a management team and a workforce. Okay? And that really comes from at the top, what management principles have we adopted? Okay? So when we start thinking about trying to transform an organization, we usually try and do it down here. I've got up here, this is the easiest place, just go and try that. But actually what causes this system to behave the way it does, and what causes resistance to change, is we're not paying much attention to this. Okay? This is the ceiling, just about here, this is how far most of these organizations get. And then we say, we blame the management. It is them. Well, I've got news for you. It is not the management. They are just as trapped as the staff. And I really want to talk about how we get out of this trap. On occasions, it's the worst place to start. I'm looking at this diagram here, and I got behaviors right down the bottom. Behaviors is not a good place to start. Behaviors are an outcome of all that other stuff. People behave in order to survive the environment that has been created around them. Okay? And you cannot police them in, saying this is how you behave. And if you're not sincere about that, then people will pick that up. This is where tools usually come in, because it's easy to sell some tools. Rather than say to an organization, we need to think about the very design and the principles that we have in the workforce. Is that the best design that gives an environment for our staff to really thrive, be innovative and adaptive? Or are we locking everything down? All of this leads to what I call a climate. This is what it feels like. All right, when I go to work, this is what it feels like. My mates and I get on really well, but actually over here it's a bit awkward. They don't want to listen. They focus on other things. So we know what this climate feels like. And all those things that I put up, all those words earlier on, are measurement of climate. We feel those things. Okay? We are human beings. We know. We actually don't need to run a test for it. We just sense that. Well, actually, what we're now going to do is we're going to run a test to see just how well on those dimensions we are, and really track that back down to the theory of management that we put in place. So what is this climate? So I'm going to leave that for a little while. I'm going to come back to measurement and incentives towards the end of my presentation. But I want to talk about climate a little bit more. I've been working with a brilliant researcher and statistician, a guy called Dr. Gary Fisher. He's been following the work that I did at Fujitsu and other companies. And basically what he's been able to determine, because he's in work psychology, is that when we start going lean in some sort of depth, it actually changes the thinking, feelings, and perceptions of customers when they're engaging with you, with the employees, the managers, and the leaders. Their perceptions and their feelings start to change. And this results in new behaviors as well. Okay? So he's managed to be able to codify some of this, and we've turned it into a diagnostic. And what we also found is that those are organizations that have a profile which is adaptive, innovative, and engaging, which is the lean ideal. They will have long-term prosperity. And there's a lot of evidence for that, and I'm happy to share that with anybody after this talk. If you imagine taking an air sample above a city, you analyze that for pollutants and all those sorts of things. If you see there's things that shouldn't be there, sort of pollutants and dioxins or whatever, you don't need to go down on the ground to know that that's an unhealthy environment. You don't have to go in and out of all the houses and shops. We can get that air sample. And we can diagnose what is probably likely going on the ground with what we're finding in the air. The other thing is, not only is it diagnosing that, what we can say is, well, if you continue to put this stuff into this atmosphere, into this climate, these are the long-term effects. Okay? So now what I'm going to show you is how we use measures of climate to diagnose the organization, to find the bits of the organization that are healthy and the less healthy parts, and be able to talk about, well, what if they don't change, what are those consequences? Okay, it's simply the climate is the thinking, feelings, and perceptions of customers, employees, and managers. Just keep that in mind as I go through this. What the research has shown, we had something like 300 dimensions that we thought may or may not be influencing the organization. Which ones were cause and effect? We managed to get those down to 60. And over the last 5 years, we've been testing that rigorously. And basically, we needed to find a way of bringing that information to a wider audience in less than 64 dimensions. So what we've created here is to say, look, there are basically 4 capabilities an organization needs to create for it to be adaptive, learning, or what I call a sense and respond organization. It's locking on to its environment, making sense of that at all levels, and changing its policies, procedures, measurement systems, products, and services continuously behind that without somebody coming up with a long-term strategy. It almost is the end of strategy in many ways. And those 4 dimensions, when I show you, most of you, it will be obvious. They are these. How well the organization engages deeply with its customers, and I don't mean with focus groups, I mean everybody who talks to customers, whether they're on an IT help desk, whether they're a sales rep, whether they're an account manager, whether they're senior managers, all of those get these perceptions and information from customers. But very people use it, except maybe the product development guys and the marketing guys. But actually, there are a lot more points in the organization we can collect that. Okay, so engaging deeply, sensing deeply. Then, once we've got this information, how do we share it? Is it a select few that are going to come up with something and then come out and say, this is where we're going, without testing it, without multiple views? So learning from that information is key. Do we share it within our teams, across functions? Do we share our information with management teams, with senior teams? How often do we get to speak to senior managers? It's a very important point. And leading. Which form of leading do we take? All right, is it, I am the leader, this is where we're going, these are the products, get the marketing campaign going, and push, 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 we will create the demand. Okay, and then we'll incentivize. And then we will incentivize our staff for going after it. Okay, now that's one paradigm, but it's not the only one. It's not what you would do in a lean environment. And then improving. Do we have the means end-to-end for people to improve their workplace, the business, the products and services, and the level of service we give our customers? There's just 4 dimensions. So how well does your organization engage with customers, get that information and shares and learns from it, then makes decisions based on distributed leadership rather than leadership at the top, and then those people have the ability to act on it. These are like the 4 vital organs in the body. Unless you're doing all 4, it doesn't work. It's a closed loop. We have to do that. Okay? If you've got a part of the business that's engaging really well, but it's not sharing with the rest of the business, then we're not going to act on it. Any one of them not functioning like the vital organs of the body, you're dead. It's pointless saying, my liver was in a bad way, and I'm probably going to die of that, but my heart's great. It's a nonsense. Okay, we have to link this up. We have to link this up as a way of practice within a business. So what do I mean by engaging? I'm going to rattle through this. I'm just comparing different ways different organizations engage. Does the job design of our staff allow them to engage with customers or users, or are they not allowed to talk to them? You'll be surprised that a lot of jobs are designed so they're not allowed to talk to the customer. That is, the manager has to do that. Okay, to what extent can staff modify the solutions because the customer wants it in a slightly different format? Or have they got to get permission? Okay. Is everything forbidden unless it's permitted? I can't do anything unless you tell me. Or is the environment, I can do anything I like, but I can't touch that bit? All right? You can see that's a completely different way of working within an organization. And this comes from management attitudes. A lot of this stuff is not written down. Okay, but it's solid. Learning. Give you some examples. Do staff routinely share business intelligence about what's going on with their customer base? And I'm talking about frontline staff now. With their senior management. Do they ever see them? What is the management focus? Is it on employee utilization, cost reduction, and work intensification? Or does the focus of the management work on improving the creativity of my staff, being focused on the customer outcomes, problem-solving ability, and learning and sharing knowledge? Now, those are completely different management skills. Okay? And most management can learn that, but something gets in the way, as we will see later. Leading. Do leaders foster a no-blame climate, where these are experiments, or are we looking for somebody to blame all the time? Do they spend time in the workplace involving frontline staff, sorting out their issues? Or do they stay in their office and they're in meetings all the time, so therefore they do not understand anything? Do they pay more attention to the efficiency-driven targets, or to the end-to-end effectiveness of creating customer outcomes? These are the sorts of questions we need to be asking. And then improving. Do employees influence the end-to-end business process, or all I do is my little piece here? David Joyce gave a fantastic presentation this morning, and he was showing how the Kanban board can be expanded from not just my little piece, as important as it is, but what happens upstream and downstream is just as important, because we can sub-optimize this whole end-to-end business by optimizing the middle if we're not careful. We have to have that end-to-end perspective. But the very nature of the job and the job design and our targets focuses on that little narrow scope. That causes major problems. It makes decision-making very bad. Okay, so let me put this together before I show you the more complicated diagram. I'm giving you some warning, because they are busy. These slides will be available. Let's look at the traditional mass production make and sell organization and what I call the sense and respond lean enterprise. Let's just look at 4 dimensions. What is the customer's experience, or the user experience if it's an internal user? What's the employee motivation for serving that customer? What do the support operations look like? And what I mean here is anybody that's sitting behind the front line, including the management. And what do the executive leadership do? And I'm going to compare these two. Because when you work in a lean environment, it feels completely different. Okay? Most people get it feels different, but they can't put their finger on it. What I'm trying to do is put our fingers on it so we can do something about them. Okay. The customer or user experience. Is it transactional and personal? Here it is, here's the ticket, I'm going, here's my log numbers, this is what it is, and I've got to chase. You don't know anything about me, you're just processing me. Or is it relational and personal? Oh, I know what you're doing with this ticket. I know what your business is up to, and I know how important this is, and how critical, because I understand you and your business. Or am I just processing a unit of work? Employee motivation. Is it, I process as much as I can, and if you give me more incentives, I'll probably work harder and do more. I'll push it, okay? This is incentivizing what I call busy, busy, bang, bang work. All right? Or is it willing contribution? I can see what difference this makes to my customers' lives. And listen, as long as I've got enough money to survive and maybe a bit extra, I'll probably work my heart out. And a lot of you guys do. All right? But in this bottom half here, we still get people, even in the incentivized contribution, we still get people working their heart out. But we're relying on heroics. In a lean environment, you should not be relying on heroics. That's a sure sign that there's something up if you're relying on heroics. The support and the management, functional efficiency or end-to-end effectiveness, and leadership, is it direct and control? Or some people use command and control. It's top-down. These are the targets. This is what you can do. Push. And if they won't push hard enough, give them some incentives. And you can incentive up or down with character stick. The thing I want to point out to you, and I think you'll get this quite quickly, the flow of direction here of knowledge and information goes this way. It's the people in the hierarchy that would know this, they push this down to these, and they push it on to the customer. It pushes products and services on command from the top. Employees and customers are usually designed out of this. They're the last thing to think about. But in a lean enterprise, the customer pulls products and services. We understand here. We are collecting information about this. We are sharing that with the rest of the business and seeing how well we are delivering to that. And we are passing that information on to the executive to say, look, this is what we found. You thought it was like that, but that's not the reality. This is the evidence. It's different. So they listen and adapt. Okay, so the knowledge flow is completely in the opposite direction in a lean and agile, adaptive organization. We can see that. So I'm going to move on with this now and just expand that on a couple of dimensions which we have tested for. If you just look at the organizations on mass production, what I could characterize the make and sell, the offerings that their organization gives are usually low variety. Whereas up in the top, Sensorbond, it's individualized, personal, bespoke, unique, flexible offerings. Adaptive. Okay? So if you look at the customer experience, it's a transactional process. There's very little involvement in the solution design. In the adaptive organization, there is co-creation of the solution design. You look at the employee expertise, expert, broad knowledge, providing integrated solutions. In the make and sell, it's basic. In fact, we try to make it as basic as possible, push it down. So they do the most menial job that you can think of, and you get them to do it a lot. Oh, busy, busy, bang, bang, busy, bang, bang, bang. Okay? There's no thinking. Who is responsible for improvement? Improvement boards, improvement specialists, suggestion schemes. I mentioned that last week, and somebody said, oh, we've got a suggestion box, and we've got a slot in the top too. Management focus is it creativity, expertise, so you can see the different type of development that the manager has for himself and his staff. It's very different. The competitive basis. Here, you'd want to go for commoditized, high volume, is low margin, and I would look for economies of scale. Up here, I go for economies of scope, trusted expert advisor, integration, business outcomes, and there's our leadership. So you can see these are different types of organization. Now, what I will say to you is saying, well, that's fine depending on your product, but what I'm saying to you is Toyota, do that top one when they make cars. Okay? So there is a difference between the mass production paradigm, which is here, and the lean. You can still use lean in manufacturing, but it's lean manufacturing on a different set of people principles. I'll just point out before I move from this slide these two important factors, disciplined experimentation or disciplined compliance. We all know the difference. But when we were doing this research, it was pointed out to me that there are two other states in between. I'm not going to go into them in this presentation for the interest of time, but I'm showing you now so that when I show you the graphs later on, it'll make some sense. You have the mass production, symbolized by a bus. All right, here's you get on, you're taken, you sometimes have to go away from your journey. It's batch and queue. All right, the driver is not involved with you, he's not even allowed to talk to you. Okay, and it's compliant on my own schedule. And the bus will go even if it's empty. Okay? As opposed to mass customization, which is a bit like a similar model, but it's like a pizza parlor. It's very much the same product, but there's a little bit more engagement because I got some options to discuss. All right? But actually, the bottom two are the industrial model. Moving up into mass specialization, and I'm starting to think where we now get into working with experts. But these are experts in their own domains. And it's a bit like a department store. Just think about that as a metaphor. But I, as a customer, go into the department store. I know I need an outfit for whatever it is, and I am going to the department store to put that outfit together. But when I get in front of somebody with the accessories, boy, they know about accessories, somebody else knows about shoes, but I've got to do the integration of the whole thing. Compared to the top one, which I could not get a satisfactory metaphor, so I had to make one up, which was, it's the customer value enterprise. Everything that we do is measured on, does this create customer value? And that's where the CVE comes in. And that is basically the top-end lean environment. Okay. As I said on there, warning, next slide is a signpost. For more information, do not try to read this. It's in the slide set for completeness. All right, and I'm going to make the slides available at the end of the conference. So what we've done is, this is the taxonomy of these different environments. And what we are looking at an organization is saying, where do they sit on these dimensions? Each one of these organizations will do engaging, learning, leading, improving in very different ways. Okay, so we're now looking for those things. These are the sorts of questions. This is just a sample, but we're looking at what levels of freedom and decision-making do staff have? What sort of customer-facing activity? Do we get customer intelligence and share it? How do we share it? Where does it go? Okay, do we share it with top management? Performance management. Are you performance managed on how well you're doing at your busy, busy, bang, bang stuff, where the manager wants more bangs for the buck? Okay? Or are you performance management and saying, you know what? You've helped identify new opportunities for developing a new product, and you've optimized our business. That's terrific. Okay? One is looking at units processed, and one is looking at outcomes. And your performance management system and your goals and targets for people are going to be completely different. So that's why we asked that question. Does the leadership adapt or just tell? All right, and how much influence do employees have on the products and services, or are they shut out of that process completely? Okay, remember, engaging, learning, leading, and improving, and then just by asking the attitudes of staff, we can find out these things. So this slide here, what we have across horizontally is mass production, mass customization, and at the top, the lean enterprise. This is a large global services company, most of which was in application development. You will know this company. It is a premier applications development brand. If you don't know the name of this company, you're not on the planet. Well, some of you might not be. This is a company that says we learn and we adapt. But when we looked at the way they structured the work for their staff, it was a mass production model. So now what we had is the rhetoric was at the top, but the way we set up the work was at the bottom. And we get this dissonance. Okay? What we see from this, okay, is it's not even a good mass production model. All right, because all those bars would be quite wide in mass production. But A and B up there, freedom and decision-making and customer-facing activity. It looks as if they did do some of that, but they didn't learn from that. They didn't share it with anything, and they didn't make any decisions, and they couldn't improve anything anyway. Okay? So, going through an intervention process on a number of dimensions with a route map, up to about, that's 2010, a year and a half later, we've got this. This is the thinking and feeling change in perspective of 2,000 people. From that to that. Okay? And I'll show you how we did that in a moment. But you can see now we can measure these dimensions. Is this making sense? All right, let's just try another one. This is a global ICT and applications company. This one is not 2,000 people. This is about 1,800. So, okay. That was it. It was mass production principles and paradigms and how we were designing and measuring and coaching staff. Why? And not because they were bad people, it's because they didn't know any other way of doing it. Because they learned that at business schools. Because they don't teach the lean stuff at business schools as much as they should. So this is what that went to. Huge change. This organization changed so much that it changed its products and services to its customers. Okay? It had a big outsourcing division attached to it. They found they didn't need that, because they were so good at removing unnecessary work within the organization that they didn't need these outsourced suppliers to process their waste. We were much more optimized and much more flexible and adaptable. So I will leave that for just 1 second, and I'll come back to it. This is probably the most important slide, and I can't impress that enough. Respect for people is a phrase that we use within the Lean movement and the Kanban movement, I've got no doubt. Okay? But what do we really mean by that? I don't mean respect for people that a manager is showing respect for individual rights, ethnic orientation, sexual orientation, all of those things that are designed to make sure there's no discrimination. I'm not talking about that respect for people. All right? That is really important. But if you didn't show that, you wouldn't be in your job long anyway. No, what I'm talking about is something over and above that, where we want people to take responsibility for their problems, not hand them up in escalations to management. In Lean, you do not take the problem away from your staff. If you take a problem away from your staff, they fail to learn, and it shows you do not trust them. And they become dependent on you. And if you're a manager, your staff go home, and you have all the problems on your desk, and you work late. Okay? You might figure out how to fix this stuff, but your staff have learned nothing. This is really, really important, and I think the Toyota Carta and all these other things are really about learning how to learn and giving people the freedom to be able to fail safely. Okay? This is vitally important, and I think this is the phrase that always chokes me up. There's a world of difference between helping people to see and telling them they're blind. That's not the way you do it. Let me show you how to do it. I did your job years ago. I know how to do this. Well, that was yesterday's solution. The world is very different today. And if you go diving in like that, you blow any respect that the person has had for you, and anytime there's a problem, they'll escalate it to you. Okay? Managers helping employees to freely choose the method and experiment the method by which they're going to solve a problem. Okay? And when I've done that, I've often seen a solution that I would put in, and I have to bite my tongue. And that's of discipline. Because you could probably fix it, but it's your solution. You're recycling your old solutions. Okay? I'm never disappointed with the solutions they come up with because it was better than mine. Okay? 99 times out of 100, it is better than mine. And guess what? I've got a payoff in that I've got a better developed person as well. We talked about behaviors, and we have the behavioral police. All right? The survey takes into account, okay, the real perceptions. You may be behaving with all this sincerity, but people know that you are doing it just because you've been told to do it. So these behaviors have to be freely given. So if a manager is demonstrating all the right behavior, but the employee knows you're only doing that because you've been told to do it, it has no effect. Okay? Just think about it like love. Okay? If you can pretend to love, but most people know you do. Okay? Sincerity is everything. Once you can fake sincerity, you've got it made. So it's able to establish fake behaviors from real behaviors. This is from a quote from Joel Kuchner-Gershenfeld. When he gave this, he was the head senior research scientist at MIT. He worked with me on the book and some of this work. He has since gone on to become Dean of Oregon University for labor and business. And what he said is this is a shift, climate shift on a massive scale. I'll draw you to the last one here. It's a shift to a climate in which learning is seen as central to business success, not an add-on activity. It is designed in, not tagged on every Wednesday. Okay, so I'm coming to the last part of my presentation. I just want to put all of that aside for a moment and just say, well, what are some practical things that we can think about? And I'm going to come back to this diagram. We looked at climate over there and its broadest way of testing it. I really want to drill down on measurement and incentives. But I could just as easily drill down on any of the others. Okay? But I think the measurements and incentives is probably more relevant to most of us in business. Okay? So let me just pass that on. And I'm thankful for David Joyce for using this diagram this morning. He's taken this diagram and used it in a very innovative way. And what he did was to use the Kanban stickers and some other, the perspective work, and he put it into this diagram, which is a very novel way, and I fully support that. And I've been finding that lots of people are using this diagram in very many ways that I hadn't thought about, which is great. I'm learning from them. What I wanted to do with this was to demonstrate to senior management and the staff that the measurement systems that they had in place, for the most part, were completely irrelevant. Okay? So we would sit down, we get all the measurements, and we put them in here. We're not going to use averages, and I'm not going to get into the business about averages and not good measures. Average with a range is probably acceptable, okay? But it has to be an average and range about something that's important, not an average and a range about something that's not important. I have a saying, if you measure your business using averages, don't be surprised to find yourself running an average business. Okay? It's that range that we're talking about. So, we'll take our measures. Does this matter to the customer? No or yes? And does this measure only get applied to one local function? Or is it a measure that is shared end to end? It's a common measure. Now, which ones would you think you should have from this? I'm going to say, is it quadrant 1? Do you want to have measures in that? Hands up those who do. Quadrant 2 at the top there. Okay. What about this one? You can have functional measures that relate to the customer. Would you want some in there? Yep, that's fine. What about the top? Yes, I think everybody would say that. So I'm going to take some measures. It happens to be ITIL measures, and you can probably furnish me with some development measures, and I'd like to run an experiment and see that. So anybody who's up for that, come and talk to me afterwards. I'd like to find that out. ITIL measures. This is from the official ITIL measures book. Now, what does that tell us about the mindset of the organization? I tell you what it means is that where it does not matter to the customer, these measures are related to resource control of some kind. Just think about that. It's a resource of some kind, whether it's money, time, all right, on the production. Over here is about outcomes for the customer. That is about efficiency. This is about effectiveness. And most organizations have very few effectiveness measures. The dominant measure is the functional measure. So let's take this. This is a large company. This is, I won't tell you what the name of the company is, or even the industry, because that's unfair. Okay, they did change. These were their measures, okay? And they started realizing why they didn't have good customer engagement. Okay, because they weren't. They were all looking at the efficiency. This is another set of measures. This is an IT department and application support, configuring, deployment, upgrading applications, as well as infrastructures. We sat down. There's a cross-functional team with developers, managers, and all those sorts of things. And we put these measures in. And that's what we got. And they said, yeah, see, we're customer-focused. So we went through another process. A week later, after they'd been out in the field, talking to customers and other people, we came back and we did exactly the same thing. Same group of people, same exercise. And something quite remarkable had happened. Their handwriting had improved tremendously. They were taking this a little bit more serious now, because they had found out that what they were trying to do had nothing to do with the outcomes, strategic outcomes for the business. They thought that it's somewhere it sort of rolls up. That somebody must have thought this out, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. But they were wrong. Okay? Now, the critical point here is if you want to transform this organization to think about lean, to think about we need to get customer focus and manage our business end to end. Which team do you want to work with? The team that thinks like that, or the team that thinks like that? Okay, they're the same people. There's been a mind shift. Now we need to give a skill shift. We can now work with them. They can see the importance. This is a similar map. It's a different organization. We looked at all the measures, and their measures map looked very similar to this. But I'm using this for a slightly different reason. Can anybody guess? There's a clue up there. These were pain points. And I really hate senior management saying, go and collect the pain points and make sure you deliver all the pain points for the managers, because that way you'll get acceptance. And I'm going, but that doesn't make sense. So we mapped all the pain points. These are all the pain points they're suffering. It doesn't matter to the customer, and they're functional. So in lean terms, this is waste pain. Waste pain. All right, we're worried about the wrong things. Okay? But we really need to talk about the effectiveness. It gets worse. Okay? This was a public sector IT department and applications, and they were doing some very modern applications, bringing them in, reconfiguring them, and deploying, and all the change management that goes with that. And they were getting the requirements from the user, and they usually went through the usual pain points and trying to get requirements. So after our investigation, they found that most of their internal service measures and SLAs, so this is the IT department and application support, we got all the wrong measures. We don't really know what's going on. This is internally focused. All right? So we'll talk to our users, not necessarily about their application and requirements, but what are they measured on? Okay? It's a different set of measures related to how they're servicing citizens. The users' measures were all in this same quadrant. So they mapped the users' pain points. So when they develop in applications, they're developing it for these. And I think this starts to indicate why, in the UK at least, a lot of large government projects don't return the investment or change of experience for citizens, as promised. Because nobody really understands the outside citizen, because my internal measurement is focusing me inside. These are not bad people. We've created a bad system by design. The default position by design is mass production paradigm. Okay? This is what we've got to change. These are some of the reasons why we can't get lean to scale sometimes, or agile to scale, or Kanban to scale, because they're working on different rules, and we have to change those rules. This is a chap, neatly dressed, explaining to the management team that all that stuff that we've got for requirements, we've really got to do again, and it's actually no benefit for the citizens of their city, which is why they were buying this equipment in the first place, and these applications. Completely redesigned. It's the equivalent of going in front of a senior management team and saying, it's like saying to a mother, you imagine they sitting there wanting to talk to a management team. The metaphor is like standing in front of a mother and saying, hey, Mom, did you know your baby's ugly? So they needed to have that strength and that data. Okay? I will quickly use the last 5 minutes of my presentation to talk about another technique, which again is in the Sense and Respond book, which talks about we need to understand what value is. All right? A lot of work, and I've been studying some of the things on the Kanban approach. I think selecting work to go through that and controlling the WIP is ideal, because that gives you the time to do it properly. All the benefits that we know. You know it even better than I do. But I was struck by some of the boards, some of the stuff that was getting into the WIP. I was questioning, why are we even doing that? What's the value of that? And I will say one thing, all right? It's not a rebuke. Okay, because we're all friends here. What I would say for you guys to do is in your presentations, just have more of the customer in them. Okay? We could have customer bingo for the next couple of days, if you like. All right? We need to get that up. All right? Very much so. And if you're not engaged in the customer, you have to find a way of getting there. This is what I mean by the journey to customer purpose, because sometimes you're 3 or 4 stages removed. You have to find ways to get involved. This is why I don't like the product owner model very much, because he's a buffer. That's all it says. That's a mass production paradigm as far as I'm concerned. Okay? It shows very little respect for the people to be able to engage and have a meaningful conversation with customers. All right? So the demand that comes in, and this is to all organizations, there's only 4 types. There's demand that comes in where the customer says, the trigger point is, there's nothing wrong. I could be ringing up saying I would like a new application, or I'd like a new PC, or in other industries I'd like a holiday. It doesn't matter. That is create value. Creating value for me. We define by customer outcomes or customer purpose. We need to deliver that effectively to the customer and efficiently for the organization. O is for opportunity. CORE is an acronym. O is for opportunity. I will come back to opportunity in a moment. R is for restore. Some of you might know this as failure demand. It's a term which I have problems with because it's pejorative. It sounds like it's a failure, and if your job is designed just to process failure, you're a failure. I'd much rather say this is work we have to do to put things right, restore the value back to the customer. Because there is value in fixing things for customers when it's broke. When your customer's tires are breaking, you want to fix them and get them back on the road. But at some point we need to say, well, which part of the road is causing these tires? So the fix to get it back up is entirely needed, and that is of value to the customer. But you're not creating value, you're just giving me back what I've lost. Okay? And it's a much better term to understand than saying somebody's failed. The other one is external. These are failures, if you like, coming from other organizations, agencies, or institutions, hitting your business, your users, and then you're asked to service those. So can you see there's a difference between remedial work that comes from your own efforts of not being right and from something else external? We're now able to sort out where the waste is getting into our organization so we can be targeted. The opportunity, why is that important? Because if we're trying to remove the bottom 2 or reduce it, okay, that might mean we don't need as many heads. All right? We're now into lean and mean. The opportunity is, in our normal transaction, the customer says, do you do A, B, and C? And we might say, well, on our support list, it says X, Y, and Z. There's no A, B, and C, go away. I'm going to get on to X, Y, and Z because that's my job. We've just thrown away our future. Because we can't supply it today doesn't mean we can't do it tomorrow. And if enough people are asking for it, that's what we should be doing. We are deeply sensing, understanding what the new needs are, systematically using that, engaging and sharing that information, making decisions based on data. That is where you take the people that have taken the restore down. You've given them a future by working on the opportunity. You don't have to reduce the headcount. In fact, in many ways, you don't have to worry about reducing costs. What you're doing is delivering greater levels of value for the same cost. Okay? If you are expecting people to take waste out and just think about waste, and people say, hey, my job is all about waste, I'm going to be removed. Okay? You do not get engagement from the staff. It's like asking turkeys to plan for Christmas. It won't happen. Okay? People are smart. But showing them where to go is really important. Let me just do this thought experiment. This is just all the problems coming in to an IT department or application support department, and we're going to put them into these different bins. Just imagine these are boxes. The size of the boxes tells you how many of these problems are in there. And we're just going to sort this into these. Okay, so an application problem previously would have been saying, hey, application problem, I'll fix that first time. That's great. My first time fix rate is great. All right. My first time fix rate is 70%, they say. And I say, well, how long has it been like that? Oh, it's been like that for at least 2 years. 2 years? You've been fixing the same stuff. Why aren't you taking it out? But it's held up as a badge of honor, and it's crazy. So let's just have a look at application is a problem, engineer not right. Some of them is obvious, but a lot of it is not obvious. And I do not want to get into the refactoring argument while I'm up here. We'll leave that for another day. Okay. So we can see this is how a profile is made. And those could be Kanban cards in just the same way. So let's look at a profile. This is a large global company, and this is just end-user support for applications. So these were people suffering because there were bugs in applications, they couldn't use it, the usability, all sorts of things. All right? In this case, it's 53% of the incoming demand from users was because they had a problem with an application of some kind. Now, while they're talking to the guys on support, they are not working for their company. So who's paying their bills? All right? But when we produce the application or the IT infrastructure, we do not factor the wastage in other people's budgets because, hey, we don't even see it. But sharing budgets is another issue, which we can talk about on another occasion. This is Fujitsu. Okay? This is infrastructures as well as application support. 2 years later, it was that. Just imagine you could take out 40 or 50% of your work in progress just because you've identified that its origin is waste. It is unnecessary. Would that free up resource? Of course it would. It's not about processing the waste faster, but most of the work that we do, we don't even see it as waste. It's institutionalized, so we see it as value. And all we do is we make the waste go faster. We get cheaper, neater, faster waste. And it makes our budgets look okay. All right? But that's waste times 2. So we've got waste pain. We've got waste on top of waste. And the reason we've got waste is because we do not know what value is. This is a telecommunications organization. It's a large European one. It's about 16,000 people. Their biggest problem was customer churn, and this is business to business, by the way. Some of their clients were threatening to take their services elsewhere and use other people's networks, etc., etc. Okay, so 87% of the work that was coming in was because there was a problem with these guys' infrastructures. Okay? But that doesn't matter. They were fixing them all in a reasonable time, and they'd reduced the cost of fix. So I said, like on these diagrams, we can assign, how much of the workforce is working on these. So I said, how much of the workforce is working on this 87% that's coming in from your customers? That shouldn't be coming in. That's really high. You need to do something about it. You must have got a lot of people working on this. And they went, they looked a bit shifty. And they said, well, about 20% of the workforce are working on this. That doesn't seem like much. So you've got 80%, 87% coming in, you shouldn't come in, and you've only got 20%. So what are the others doing? 60% were chasing the efficiency of the 20% who are working on the 87% which shouldn't be coming in. Now can you see this is just madness? Now, what I'm saying here is not effective in day-to-day work. All right? This is really to get management to realize the mindset that we have at the moment is really screwed up. So that's what's changed. Lots of changes in behaviors. You can look at those. But let me just leave you with this. That was that telco before. That was the telco after. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Stephen. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Is there a question?
Do you gather this data asking people? Is it about their how they feel about all those questions, or it is kind of...
Yeah, this one here was a direct statement from the staff. Is that what you're asking about? Yeah. You can see, like, before, I think it's 1, 2, 3, the 4th question down, before the change, all right, if you ask them a question, it is my job to share information with my peers and managers. That wasn't even in the job description. Now it is, okay? I help my organization understand what customers value. That wasn't even in there. Remember, it's designed out. That's changed to 82. Now, the one I was a little disappointed was, my management team is committed to improving the quality of work. That was 17 before, but we did push it up to 50. Okay? Because it takes some time for management to say, okay, I'm weaning them off the other measures, or am I going to get beaten up because of that? So there's a lag. Okay. Look at my data improves the quality of decision making. 0 before. I never got that data. I never ran experiments. I never collected it. I never shared it with anyone. But now they're making better decisions. And that's all we want. Does that answer your question? Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Stephen, thanks. First of all, great talk. I really appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit more for me about massive adaptation in contrast to the benefits of focus? Because when I first heard you say that, my first inclination was maybe that's contradictory to focus, but I don't think so. So hopefully you can correct me a little bit.
I think you can have a mass production model that is focused. All of those can be focused. I think the question is can we respond to that focus? Do I have the right procedures, the right structures, the right measurements, and am I incentivizing in the right way? So it's my ability to respond that I'm questioning. All right. Also focus, it may be the wrong focus as well. All right? Because focus, when you say stay focused, implies that it's the right focus. Very often it's not. Okay? So all organizations have focus, but it needs to be the right focus. We need to sense deeply, and then we need to have systems and process to respond appropriately. Almost real time. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for
Thank
a very
you.
inspiring keynote.